Um, Welcome everyone, and thank you IATI for this opportunity to present our brief. At the beginning, just to introduce myself and my colleague, my name is Goslwaska. I'm policy officer working for ActionAid. Today we're going to be presenting our learning brief, which is called Using IATI Data to Analyze Finding Flows during ActionAid Bangladesh COVID-19 Response in 2020. This brief I'm going to be presenting with my colleague Anna Petruccelli, who is Senior Data and Transparency Specialist, also working for ActionAid UK. This brief was developed with partnership with ActionAid Global Secretariat and ActionAid Bangladesh colleagues. And we would like to talk to you today about objective of the brief, methodology, and summary of findings. Can I have next slide, please? At the beginning, some housekeeping rules. Please make sure your Zoom display name includes your full name and organization. Also, we reserve nice chunk of time on the end of this short presentation to hear from you. We would like to hear your feedback, your questions, as well as if you're implementing anything similar to this brief or anything similar to actively promote publication to IATI, we would be really, really keen to hear from you. How you can do it. You can ask questions via chat box. Also to remind you that live interpretation is available in English, French, and Spanish. Next slide, please. Before we start, I would like to clarify some bits about the report and about our presentation here. The brief which we developed, it's not a fancy IATI data analysis piece. The objective of this brief was to promote IATI within the Federation members, which require us to simplify data to make sure that those members of the Federation who are not very familiar with IATI will feel very comfortable with this document. We haven't followed all best practices in IATI publishing. We've started contribution with ActionAid Bangladesh in late 2020, when all the projects were already finished, which means that our publication wasn't timely, but it served the purpose of the report and purpose of promoting IATI within the ActionAid Federation. This internal learning brief wasn't shared between Federation members just yet. It's still with the designer. We are hoping for it to be out within a few weeks. And then we're going to start internal dissemination, which will include a lot of trainings and learning circles. This means that we won't be able to provide you with the outcomes of this brief and what was the feedback from the members of the Federation. But on the end of this presentation, we're going to share our email addresses. Then we really, really welcome you if you've got more questions to reach out, and as soon as we'll have some more information, we can share it with you. Lastly, we want to be talking about ActionAid Bangladesh COVID response. As I mentioned before, this presentation will be focusing on objectives of the brief, methodology, and summary of findings. We use ActionAid Bangladesh as a case study to make nice background in explaining how useful IATI can be in practice. Can I have next slide, please? At the same beginning, just a little bit about ActionAid UK, ActionAid Federation itself. ActionAid is global federation, including 40 members from around the world. Our main headquarters is based in Johannesburg, and it's called Global Secretariat. Global Secretariat oversees, support, and guide decision made by members of the Federation to help us achieve shared goal. ActionAid mission is working with the most vulnerable members of the community, especially women and girls, who are very, very often excluded and living in poverty. Additionally, our internal culture is driven by feminist leadership principles, and all our humanitarian work and all our humanitarian actions are driven by our ActionAid's humanitarian signature. Our humanitarian signature includes shifting the power. Shifting the power is strongly related to localization. What we try to do, we try to promote gender-led localization, which means that we focus on women's rights, women-led organizations, working with them during program implementation and response to crisis and emergency, as well as through this work building their capacity to enable them to respond for bigger crisis and emergency more independently in the future. Women's leadership. During our humanitarian actions, we train women to be leaders. What we try to do here, we try to make women to be active driver of change, not passive recipients of aid. This brings also cultural change where we challenging gender harmful cultural norms. The third component is accountability. All our humanitarian actions are informed by members of the community. We putting all the efforts to make sure that we meet needs of the communities the best we can. We also encourage members of the community to keep us accountable for our actions. All of those components are underlined by resilience and sustainability. What we try to do is make sure that all the actions all the humanitarian actions we do bring long-term sustainable change for the communities. Can I have next slide, please?
I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries, thank you. Previous one. A little bit about ActionAid commitment to greater transparency and localization. ActionAid is a signatory of grant bargain since 2018. And through this time, we've been promoting commitments to grant bargain commitments within Federation as much as we can. In terms of transparency, ActionAid invested resources to hiring IATI specialists. There is awareness raising and training on IATI, which is mainly led by the IATI specialist. We participate in IATI-related events and external forums, as well that there is internal push to increase the number of IATI publishers within the Federation, which the great example is this learning brief which we developed. In terms of localization is very strictly connected to our humanitarian signature, which I briefly mentioned before. We participate in forums and events which are related to localization and try to promote gender-led localization through those forums. We also monitor finding flows to women's rights and women-led organizations, as well as we monitoring relationships between country colleagues, members of the Federation, and local organizations which they work with. This gives us better understanding about power dynamics and challenges and successes which they've got working with local partners. Next slide, please.
Sorry.
Oh, no worries, thank you. Very briefly about objective and aim of this report. As I mentioned before, this report was developed to promote publishing to IATI among the Federation members. This was the first objective. Second objective of this brief, by using ActionAid Bangladesh and their commitment to localization, we are promoting their work with women's rights and women-led organizations. And as I briefly mentioned before, and I believe Anna gonna explain it a little bit further, this gives us really nice background to show how useful is using IATI in documenting our actions and showcasing on tangible and showing tangible proof of our work. Additionally to the report, we added reflections and recommendations for members of the Federation who are already publishing, and for those who are really new to IATI, to give them this a little bit of confidence to do first step in start publishing to IATI. This is all from me. I'm gonna hand over to Anna now.
Thanks, Anna. It's always a bit funny when we're all presenting together. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks, Anna.
Okay, so I'll be going into a bit more detail about the process and how the brief was developed, and then what lessons we learned and how we're planning to use the brief internally. So we divided the process into a few steps. Firstly, obviously, we reached out to our colleagues in Bangladesh to see if they were interested in that, and they were immediately engaged. So we did some training with them, and in particular some finance colleagues, so that we could start the data collection. So we asked them to extract some of the data from their financial system, and kind of use a template, an Excel spreadsheet that was designed around IATI's key fields, mainly basic project information such as the name, description, start end dates, budget information, obviously participating organizations, and allocation and disbursements to local partners and their expenditure. And then we published the data together using AidStream. At the same time, Anna, my colleague Anna G, did some desk-based research on the local partners that have worked with ActionAid Bangladesh in these projects, mainly to kind of assess whether they were women's rights organizations or women-led organizations. And the final step was the data analysis. So we downloaded the data from AidStream, which comes out in a really nicely formatted file, and we used Excel to analyze it, and also to draw most of the charts. We use also Power BI just to create another chart, which is a bit more complicated, I guess, complex. But again, most of the analysis and the visualization was done on Excel. In terms of learning, so this will be a bit of a mix. So learnings around ActionAid and also around IATI. As with every project, I think there's always some good and some bad, but you can see from the slide that the good outweighed the bad in this case. So I'm going to go through quickly the benefits. So in terms of, like, the first thing that sprang out was that by analyzing information like groups of projects, we can extract information at portfolio level, while usually we focus on individual projects, and it's nice to have time to reflect and see the bigger picture, I guess, of the work that we do. Second benefit and learning is that once we were preparing the data for publication, we identified some issues where the data quality could be improved in our own systems. So that's a benefit that will impact the whole organization. Again, we thought that by having information laid out in this way, we can use it as evidence to support our commitments, and this can contribute to strengthening partnerships with donors or with partners as well, local partners. Another learning is that data analysis doesn't require complex processes and tools. As I mentioned, we've done most of it on Excel. Also, I know that obviously as ActionAid, and in alignment with our feminist principles, our humanitarian signature, we believe that transparency is good in itself, but also sometimes compliance is the hook that can attract more more interested audience. So we will also try to push it as, if you learn to publish on IATI, then you will be getting ready. And if you will apply for funding from a donor that has IATI requirements, that will make you already ready for that, and potentially, be better placed to pass their due diligence processes. Another learning or advantage and benefit of publishing to IATI is that this enables us to showcase our work on a well-known and global platform. And obviously this contributes to improving collaboration and increasing efficiency of the humanitarian sector in this case, but development also. And again, publishing to IATI simplifies data analysis processes. This is because, as I mentioned before, once you publish on AidStream, you're able to download your data, and it's in a really nicely, super clean format that you can immediately analyze. While sometimes in our organizations, we keep data on various spreadsheets and different systems, so this could also help. In terms of the less good or the challenges that we've faced, the first one is internal, and I'm assuming that this is not only related to ActionAid, but we know that within the Federation, data and information management is not prioritized at the moment, and this makes it difficult for Federation members to invest resources in something like IATI. Another challenge that we found related to the IATI standard in particular was the organization type partner country-based NGO, which is the one that we're supposed to use to track the localization commitment. And I feel like the main issue with that is that it doesn't really, it's a definition that it's more meaningful if you see it from a donor-centric perspective. So it's quite difficult to explain to colleagues in Bangladesh, and also some of the partners were not necessarily NGOs. They worked with the local clinic, for example, but if we picked the type other, that wouldn't have worked with the tracking of fundings to local implementers. Another challenge with the standard is that this is more related to ActionAid's focus on women and girls, is that there isn't a specific way of tracking funds directly to women's rights and women-led organizations. There isn't a type or a specific field that we could use. So we had to add this data manually. Another broader challenge, I guess, around IATI is that the gender marker is not consistently used, and so I guess that makes analysis on a broader level a bit harder. And then the final is the suitability of IATI tools, and I mean this in the way that, so we used AidStream and we extracted data from AidStream rather than the IATI data store, because we found that it's a more user-friendly tool, but this is not part of the IATI infrastructure, so it also comes with a sustainability challenge, especially when AidStream will start introducing fees. So these are our learnings in terms of how we're planning to use the brief. So internally within the Federation and ActionAid UK, we already used some of the analysis to inform our policy work around the future of the grant bargain. In the learning brief itself, we've included recommendations addressed to the Global Secretariat and also to ActionAid members who are already publishers and those who aren't publishers yet, so that we hope that in this way we will provide a tangible way forward. And yes, we will have an internal launch event, potentially a webinar, and we will keep promoting the brief to generate more engagement around IATI. And you can read on the slide, there's a quote from Mike Noyes, who's the Deputy Director for our humanitarian work, which kind of reflects our learnings I'm not going to read it, but we can, I'm sure, like, and the slides will be shared anyway later on. And sadly, none of our colleagues from ActionAid Bangladesh could attend today, so I'm here to kind of represent their thoughts. So in terms of how they're going to use the learning brief, they said that it will help them rethink and refine the financial data management processes and consider further rollout of IATI publication. They will use it to highlight their contribution and progress on grant bargain commitments and the localization agenda to different agencies and other stakeholders. And they will use it as part of the evidence to showcase ActionAid Bangladesh's transparency efforts. And we have a quote from Alim, who's the lead of the humanitarian work in ActionAid Bangladesh. And as I mentioned before, it kind of specifically mentions the challenge with dedicated resources to kind of push that publication forward. I think this is everything from us. We will have time for questions now. On the last slide, you have our email addresses. So if you think that, if you want to reach out, please feel free. But for now, I'm going to stop sharing and then we can have a discussion if anyone has any questions. If there are no questions, I guess we will have 20 minutes back.
Or maybe any suggestions you might have or any experience you had with your organization in try to promote publication to IATI. That will be also very, very useful to hear.
Thanks, Tanaka. Anything we would have done differently? That's a good question. I think at the beginning, sorry, this is obviously my opinion, and then Anna G, you can also add, obviously. For me, we had a bit of, we spent a lot of time at the beginning trying to define the terms of reference for the work. And I think the clarity only came once we decided the scope of the learning brief. So once we kind of you know, made a decision that we were going to use COVID response, so have like a quite focused approach. And obviously we only worked with a very limited number of projects, which represents only a small percentage of the portfolio of our colleagues that our colleagues manage. But I think, you know, deciding kind of the scope of it made us focus on, you know, what we actually wanted to get out of the brief. So I think,
just to quickly add, like echoing everything what Anna said, definitely the scope. Firstly, we try to have slightly bigger scope. We wanted to focus on Rohingya response, which would be few years implementation project, but because of lack of capacity from ActionAid Bangladesh, we had to shift it to slightly smaller scope, which help us work faster. But these discussions with the countries, discussions among each other, this took quite long time to decide what's going to be our focus. When we decided about the focus, everything went quite quick and nice. Thank you for the question.
There's another one in the chat from Thea, how we used AidStream as a source instead of the data store. Well, we were able to do that because we only used our own data, like only ActionAid Bangladesh's data. We didn't use any other organization's data. So when you publish to AidStream, you have the option to download the data, all the data that you publish, and it comes out in Excel. I don't see any other questions. Oh, okay. What would be your suggestion for categorizing local partners? That's a good question. Thanks, Anand. It's a tricky one, but I would probably separate the two things. So have the type of organization separated from where they are, like, you know, and keep consistency, because the rest of the types, I think, except another couple, they can use both for government and partner countries, or, you know, sorry, donor and partner countries. So foundations or research, academia, they can be used for both organizations, I guess, wherever, like for all organizations, wherever they're located. So I would just probably find a different methodology, maybe just say, if the national NGO is based in the country where the response is happening, likelihood is that they are a local organization, unless they're affiliated with a INGO, but in that case, they could use INGO. That's my 2 pence. I don't know if any other, anyone else has any other suggestion. If there are any more questions, I think we can close it here. I don't know, what do others think? Okay. Okay, well, thanks for attending, and yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any other comments or questions. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.